In the grey morning light of Wellington Harbour, the sailing ship Pamir is being made ready for another long voyage across the Pacific. The tugs are alongside and lines are made fast for them to tow the Pamir out into the stream. She sailed throughout the war between New Zealand and the west coast ports of America, braving mines and submarines, taking wool and tallow, and returning with valuable lend-lease cargoes in her hold. The tugs pull away. The Pamir, an all-steel ship, was built for a finish line in 1905 for the phosphate trade. But in 1941, she was declared a prize of war and became a New Zealand vessel. The crew begin preparations for clearing harbour. The capstan is used to hoist the heavy sail. And she is underway, manned by young seamen keen to learn the mariner's trade in this, one of the only deep-sea sailing ships still in active service. Out into the open sea, now clear of enemy raiders, and she will sail freely before the strong trade winds until her long voyage ends.
Homeward bound, around the Horn. Then came the cry of call all hands on deck. The Dauber knew its meaning. It was come, Cape Horn, that tramples beauty into wreck and crumples steel and spikes the strong man dumb.
This is a factual and visionary narrative on the departure from Wellington, New Zealand, of the 43-year-old four-masted bark Pamir, London bound with a cargo for beleaguered Britain.
The crew of the Pamir today no longer sing sea shanties, but many's the time her timbers have resounded to the rhythmic beat of sailors' feet as they sang these songs of the sea. For centuries, there has been excitement and drama associated with the great sailing ships of the sea, and many stories are told of heroism and courage in the face of the angry elements. The bark Pamir, which has made several voyages between America and New Zealand in recent months, and which on Friday, the 3rd of October, left Wellington for London via Cape Horn, has figured not the least in the romance of sail.
Launched in 1904 at Hamburg, she's had many varied experiences, and it may be that she'll add yet another battle with the elements to her already colourful career in her coming trip around the Horn. The New Zealand Broadcasting Service deemed the occasion of this latest journey worthy of this special broadcast, and our portable recorder was at the wharf as the staunch old ship prepared to move.
I'm speaking to you now from the side of the 42-year-old 3,200-ton four-masted sailing ship Pamir. I'd like to begin by trying to give you a word picture of the scene here on the wharf, which, considering the crisis which now exists in the old country today, is a very touching one. The hold of the Pamir is full to the top with goods, which are in particular need just now in the old country. And on the wharf, there's intense activity as the loading of this, what we might call, mercy ship reaches its climax. Away on the other wharves across the other side there, I can see a number of modern ships also loading for England. No doubt you can hear some of the background noises as I speak to you, and those many people who are unable to witness this rather interesting event will perhaps be able to visualize the scene here. The Wellington Harbour Board cranes are swinging the last of the cargo aboard, and as an indication of the interest shown by the people of Wellington in this forthcoming voyage of the Pamir, there's quite a crowd here on the wharf waiting to see the old bark set out on her long journey to London. Later on, we have Captain Collier's permission to go aboard just prior to the sailing of the vessel, and then we hope to be able to tell you something about the ship and something of Captain and Mrs. Collier, officers and crew, and their thoughts and hopes about their voyage around the Cape Horn. I've no doubt that among the onlookers here today there are one or two old-timers who've been to sea under sail and who are finding many memories of the past in their minds as they watch the old windjammer getting ready for sea. I'm not quite sure, but I think I can see not very far away from here, from where I'm standing, a well-known figure in the yachting world. You may remember him, Mr. Norman Thomas. You probably remember that he skippered the yacht Ilex on her recent voyage across the Tasman. Perhaps one of you gentlemen, do you mind, George, would you go over and see if that is Mr. Thomas? I think so. Now it is. Here we are. Hello, Mr. Thomas.
How do you do, sir?
Just having a look round?
Yes. I'm just having a look at the ship. She has a great fascination for me.
A bit bigger than your vessel, eh?
Yes.
Still the same motive power, nevertheless.
Oh, yes. Yes, she's bigger than the Ilex, but I'm very interested in her all the same.
Yes, I imagine you would find this particular scene rather interesting, but there's more or less a parallel to your own voyage across the Tasman.
Yes, of course, this
small
ship
sort of
is
work.
a square rigger, of course, but the Ilex is a fore and aft sailor, but the principle of the wind pushing the ship is the same, of course.
Well, standing here, Mr. Thomas, and knowing that she's going around Cape Horn, I was just wondering whether she's got the best time for going around the Horn, best time of the year.
Well, I'm told that there's no good time for going round the Cape Horn by the old seamen. My first trip to sea, of course, on the Tainui was round Cape Horn. We had very bad weather. But that's what the old salts are very emphatic about, that you're not a sailor till you've been round the Horn, and there's no good time to go round the Horn.
There's no good time to sail around the Horn.
Caught in a ball dress, said the boatswain, hauling. Quick, high came the men's call. It was all wallop of sails and startled calling. Let fly, let blow, clew up and let go all. Now up and make 'em fast. Here, give us a haul. Now up and storm, quick, by God, we're done. The blackness crunched all memory of the sun. Up, said the mate, mizzen to gallants, hurry. The dauber ran, the others ran, the sails slatted and shook. Out of the black a flurry whirled in fine lines, tattering its edge to trail.
We're speaking to you from the chart house of the Pamir, and alongside the microphone here with us is the master of the vessel, Captain H.S. Collier, and his wife, whom, as most of you know, is making the journey to England with her husband. Now, Captain Collier, before we begin, I would like to thank you for your hospitality and cooperation in this broadcast. At such a time, with the vessel loading, it's more than generous of you allowing us aboard and finding time to talk to us. How long would it take you, do you anticipate, to make this voyage home to London?
It will take, with ordinary circumstances, not longer than 90 days. That is 25 days to the Horn and 65 days from the Horn home. But most of it, the time is really wasted, or the hard part of the trip is really in the doldrums, where we don't make much progress. But we hope to make just an average passage. We're not concerned with breaking records, for after all, we want to get home safely with this cargo. Of course, it has particular interest at this time.
And you're making for London, I understand.
London this time, and we hope that the further we go up the Thames, the better.
Good. What sort of a cargo have you aboard?
This time, tallow and wool and even Red Cross goods.
Red Cross goods?
Yes. Not great in proportion to the rest of the cargo, but still I'm sure it will be very welcome.
Everything's necessary over in the old country, I'm sure, at the present moment.
In fact, we're stowing the Red Cross stuff on the tops of the hatches for immediate discharge.
So we can get it first out. About your crew, Captain, I understand that most of them are New Zealanders.
Yes, most of them are New Zealanders, just average boys, a cross-section of our New Zealand schools. Some of them may have sold you tickets for their school concert once or sold the papers, but mostly of just about matric standard, and of course they are almost self-disciplined. Since I've been in the ship, I'm very happy to say that I've never yet even had to admonish a boy or even look sideways at one. It's quite a tribute, very flattering to their schoolmasters, and some of them not schoolmasters, they've never had a schoolmaster.
During the war years, I suppose?
During the war years, some of them were schooled by women teachers.
Were they? Now, how does it come, I mean, in a vessel like this, I should have thought that a crew would have to be fairly experienced. Are they experienced at all?
Well, their heart is in it in the first place, and many of them come from yachts, but show me the New Zealander who is yet to be found, or you could rightly describe him as not being adaptable. Whatever anyone else does, they usually do equally as well, and probably try to do better as well.
Yeah. Now, there's just one point, Captain, I would like to ask. A lot of people have seen the Pamir, but they don't understand much about her. I wonder whether you could tell them something about the vessel which you command.
Well, of course, it's sail power alone. For instance, in Sydney, when we went down to the P&O buoy to act as flagship for the regatta, it was surprising the number of people who thought that we would actually sail a quarter of a mile from Circular Quay down to the P&O buoy when we acted as flagship. But of course, the ship carries an acre of canvas, and
An acre of canvas?
An acre of canvas. We usually reckon we can put the lot on her in about 40 minutes. Of course, that's teamwork.
Yes.
The young fellows the crew are well spread up to do that type of work,
Okay.
and we are always prepared for that. Of course, when we leave, we usually sail in and out of the harbours. This time, of course, we won't be able to sail up the Thames. I think that...
It's too narrow up there.
Yes, and also I think that as far as I can gather, we wouldn't be allowed to in any case.
No.
Of course, the last time when we went into Sydney, there was no tug for us, and it didn't matter. We did it just the same.
You
But
did?
we won't take any chances, of course, with old Father Thames. We respect old age.
As you know, when we came aboard first, we told you that Mrs. Collier was here with Captain Collier, and we're just going to ask her now just one or two questions. First of all, Mrs. Collier, have you made a voyage in a vessel like this before, or on this vessel?
No, I have never been on a sailing ship before.
You haven't?
No.
Would you call yourself a good sailor? Are you used to...
Well, I think I'm a very good sailor. I've had some very rough trips in my time.
You have? Whereabouts, Mrs. Collier?
Down the Hauraki Gulf, going down to Waiheke Island on a very small boat. And I struck a very bad trip going across the strait here
Across
to
the strait?
Lyttelton
Mm-hmm.
last year.
The captain was telling me that you've been married, how long was it, 27 and a half years, Captain?
27 and a half years.
27 and a half years. And you've been at sea the whole time?
Yes. Never home when the children were born. So I don't know what it is to be an expectant father. and when they were married, well, there was no need for me to be home then even. We had one married last Saturday.
You did? When did you come down, Mrs.
I came down on Monday morning. I flew down from Auckland to Wellington.
There's a vast difference in
And-
method of transport.
Yes, it appealed to me too, going from one thing to another. And,
Have you been to the old country before?
well, no, not since I left in 1920.
Not since 1920?
No.
You have relatives over there then, have you?
My people, my parents are living in London.
And this will be the first time you've seen them for how long? 27
years.
For 27 years?
Yes.
Good heavens. What part of the old country are you from?
Southfields.
Southfields?
London. Yes.
When you sail up the Thames, you'll be in familiar scenery, eh?
Yes, I won't need any pilot.
I'm bringing her along for local knowledge. She was there after me.
That's where you step off the bridge, Captain, is it?
Yes.
And
yes.
hand over to your wife.
Of course, I didn't see her for 2.5 years until the day before we were married.
Oh, that must be pretty grim, but I suppose that's a sailor's life.
Well, it tends towards domestic harmony.
What have you to say to that, Mrs. Colley?
Well, really, sometimes I think if he was home, we wouldn't know what to do with him.
Well, thank you very much indeed.
And as another part of our very interesting visit to the Pamir, Captain Collier introduced us to some members of the ship's crew. The youngest member, the cook, and Viscount Treprain, the eldest son of the Earl of Balfour, who is known to his shipmates as plain Jerry Balfour.
Now, Mr. Merritt, our youngest member of the crew is Jeff Stitchbury of Auckland, and I think maybe he'll be able to tell you something of interest, gives you some idea of the background of the young fellows that were and where we drew our sailors.
Thank you, Captain. Now, Jeff, let's start off. How old are you?
I'm 16.
16?
Yes.
And how long have you left school then?
4 months now.
4 months?
He left school to join the Pamir.
Left school to join the Pamir? Which school was that, by the way?
That was Mount Albert Grammar School.
Mount Albert Grammar School up in Auckland.
Yes, that's right.
By the way, you say your name is Stitchbury. That seems familiar. Have you got a sister?
Oh, yes, she's well known for the swimming she does.
For swimming?
Yes.
Did she win any titles? I seem to remember that name somewhere very well in the swimming world.
Oh, she has won some places in the Auckland Championships, and she was Miss Olympic for 2 years running.
Miss Olympic, but that rings a bell. I thought I'd heard that name before. Now, how are you looking forward to this voyage then, Jeff?
Well, I've been told that it is not a pleasure trip by any means, and I'm just looking forward to it, as I have always, to a life at sea.
Good. Well, fellow, I admire your courage anyhow, because it's a thing that a lot of people would give years of their life to have done at your age. I'm sure of that. Don't you think so, Captain?
Yes, I think so. We'll call him Master Cape Horn, not Mr. Cape Horn.
Master Cape Horn's better since he's only 16. Well, good luck to you, Jeff.
Thank you very much.
And now a few words from a very colourful character, a man no vessel dare sail without, the ship's cook.
Now, Captain, you tell me you have 39 of the crew here. One of the most important things with them, of course, is their feeding. How do you manage for the food?
Well, we work at what we call a plate system in this ship. Each meal is served by the cook, or the doctor as we call him here, in the galley, and he does it very well. Of course, if you want fat meat or lean meat, that's rather unfortunate, but I don't think you have time to think of it, really.
No.
But it suits us. It's rather new in New Zealand, but a little more trouble for the cook, but he rather likes it that way, and so do we.
You call him the doctor. Well, here standing beside us now is the doctor, who is the ship's cook, and I'm just going to ask him to have a few words with you. Cook, tell me, what have you got on for dinner now at the present
Well,
moment?
now we've got barley broth, pickle pork and parsnips, mashed swedes, baked and boiled potatoes, and baked apples and custard. And, of course, they make their coffee or their tea, and that and all that after.
So it looks as if some of these boys are going to start off weighing 9 stone and end up weighing 14 by the sound of it.
Well, we hope to do that. That's what we're here for.
There's one thing I have noticed, Cook, you might tell me about. I've noticed you haven't got a ship's cat aboard here. It's most unusual.
I just put it in the freezer. We put some rabbits in the freezer. Have to fix that off right away, because it might get a bit mouldy when we get out. Lose a bit of weight.
So, how long have you been a ship's cook?
Since about, I think it's 1923 I got my ticket. I've got my ticket after, I don't know the date.
Were you in a sailing vessel then?
No, I was in a steamer.
In a steamer?
In the Vacuum Oil Company.
Vacuum Oil Company. Yeah. Have you made any trips, any voyages in a sailing vessel before?
Only this ship before.
And
up to Vancouver.
And what about during the recent war? What were you doing then?
I was in the Army, in the 27 Machine Gun Battalion.
In the Army?
Sergeant Major.
Sergeant Major?
The 27 Machine Gun.
Which echelon did you serve?
First.
In the first?
Yeah.
And where did you serve? Which theatre?
Well, went up the desert first, for about 12 months. And then we were called back, and we had to go to re-equip. And we went to Greece in the HMS Gloucester.
In the HMS Gloucester?
Yeah.
What did you come back in?
A ship called the Selwyn, one of Paddy Henderson's at Glasgow.
Well, you've seen plenty of war service by the look of it, Cook, anyhow.
Oh, yes. I try to do my share, the same as the country's worth doing it for.
Too right. Too right. Thank you very much indeed, Cook.
And finally, we spoke to the Viscount, who has been a member of the Pamir's crew for some months, and who likes the life.
And now, Mr. Merritt, here's Gerald Balfour, one of the few Englishmen in the ship, one of our young able seamen, product of the Conway and the Blue Funnel cadets, and I suppose you would like to say a few words to him.
Thank you, Captain, I would. Well, now, Jerry, you are one of the few Englishmen, as Captain says. How do you feel being aboard here with all the New Zealanders, being one of the few Englishmen?
Well, I've been very happy in this ship, and I've certainly had a great time in this country. I'm very glad to be returning home in the ship. It'd be nice to see home again. I've been aboard this ship just on a year now.
Have you had any sea experience before coming here?
Oh, yes. I was got 1 year's experience through HMS Conway. And
Conway, she's a trading ship in the Thames,
yes,
isn't she?
And a year with the Blue Funnel Line.
With the Blue Funnel Line?
Yes. I was an apprentice there, but I got leave from the company to come out here and join the Pamir. Well, I joined the Seamen's Union just the same as everybody else and stood up for the job. I was lucky enough to get picked. I've been very happy aboard the ship, and I very much like the way in which things have been run out here. And I'd like to say how many friends I've made and how much I appreciate their kindness in putting me up on one thing and another in this country. And really the very nice time and the interesting experience I've had aboard this ship and everything else out here.
Well, as a fellow countryman, I'm very glad to hear you say that, too, because I find exactly the same myself. Thank you very much, Jerry, and all the very best of luck.
And so, somewhat reluctantly, we leave the great old clipper as she prepares for her long journey. Moving our microphones and equipment to the signal station on Beacon Hill, we stand ready to bid farewell to the Pamir and her crew. As we watch her coming down the harbor, we wonder what stories she could tell. If she could but speak, there'll be many tales of struggles fought and won on grim Cape Horn.
I am the voice of Pamir. Yes, I have many stories to tell, for I've sailed that angry, swirling mass of water so many times. Cape Horn, testing ground for ships and men for untold ages. Cape Horn, the cruel, the relentless, the magnificent. There have been many times when that furious, roaring seaway has pitted its passion and might against my bulwarks, and against the spirit of the men who have guided my way. Perilous indeed have been the stormy days and turbulent nights spent off that tempestuous coast. But I would not have spent my days in placid trade wind channels. For the great reward, the splendid moment of every trip round the Horn, is that ecstatic second when both ship and crew shake the salt and spume from their shoulders. When we know that yet another battle with the Cape has been won.
A slant came from the south. The singer stood clapped to the halyards, hauling to a tune old as the sea, a fillip to the blood. The upper topsail rose like a balloon.
Swallow Cape stiff in Valparaiso zone,
said one to other as the ship lay over, making her course again a rover. Slowly the sea went down as the wind fell. Clear rang the songs.
Hurrah! Cape Horn is bet!
The coamless seas were lumping into swell. The leaking forecastles were no longer wet. More sail was made. The watch on deck was set to cleaning up the ruined, broken bare. Below, aloft, about her, everywhere.
And so the voice of Pamir fades back into the silence of her stout old heart, as the old ship eases down harbor towards the heads and towards yet another tussle with the Horn.
Watching her gentle wake, we wonder with what thought she sets out on this latest journey. a voyage to help the people of a noble seagoing nation, a nation whose greatness was founded and built upon the feats of sterling ships like this.
It is indeed a dramatic moment in the life of a windjammer. And now as she nears the heads, the first sign of spreading sail is seen, and as our eyes search the rails and rigging, we feel humble in our hearts alongside her stalwart courage. In a moment or two, as she spreads her stately canvas, we shall describe her passage through the heads.
We're speaking to you now from Beacon Hill, watching the Pamir set sail for England. It's a beautiful morning out here, quite a strong wind, slightly west of north, and the Pamir is just a beam of Breaker Bay. It was only a matter of 8 months ago from this identical position that we were telling you about the Wanganella on the Barrett's Reef, which is way down ahead of us. As she passes here, she's a beautiful sight, with practically full sail set. Got a fore-royal, main royal, and the mizzen royal set. She's got her lower spanker, but not the upper spanker. But apart from that, she's carrying her full sail. She's making about six to 7 knots through the water at the moment, and just getting out towards Barrett's Reef. Way down on my left here, we can see on Breaker Bay the sea coming up on the shore. White, just a white mass of foam as the Pamir gets through the entrance. She puts on more sail. And she's just setting a course now that appears to me to be roughly southeast, getting well out of the channel before turning up. On the mizzen, you see the mizzen royal, mizzen upper topgallant, mizzen lower topgallant, then the mizzen upper topsail and the mizzen lower topsail, and finally, of course, down to the mizzen sail. And just forward to that, the mainmast, the mainsail, main lower topsail, main upper topsail, and about that is the main lower topgallant and main upper topgallant, and finally the main royal. I think the only sail that she hasn't got there is the upper spanker. She's getting way out through the entrance now, way out into the harbour. As she goes, the good wishes of everyone in this country go with her. She is on a mission well worthy of a ship like the Pamir, full of the tradition of the past days of the sea. And we wish her Godspeed and a fair wind for the whole trip.
And so we join with our announcer in saying, Bon voyage, Pamir, one of the last of the great ocean-going clippers as she leaves, homeward bound, around the Horn.
You have been listening to a New Zealand Broadcasting Service production.
Patriotism that seeks to quash dissent and divide us is archaic. It's dangerous for our democracy. We can't tolerate that. It's antithetical to our culture.
Three months after she'd been handed back to Finland, Pamir left the wharf at Wellington to lie in the stream and prepare for her long trip to the Baltic. Her captain had been waiting for a favourable wind, and early the next morning, a northerly which would take her out of the harbour hastened last-minute preparations. At the top of the mainmast, seamen set up the all-important windsock, which shows the helmsman the direction of the wind. Other members of the crew, looking tiny on the huge spars, were aloft, unfurling enough sail to take the ship clear of the harbour. After months of inactivity, the heavy canvas stirred lazily in the light breeze and soon filled out to take Pamir towards the open sea. Out through the head she sailed, the last link with a romantic age, and almost certainly the last big sailing ship to fly the New Zealand flag. Pamir has left, but she will long be remembered for the part she played in New Zealand's maritime history.
Spectrum presents A Very Special Ship. Alwyn Owen looks at the famous square rigger Pamir through the eyes of 5 men who sailed in her.
She was big and beautiful and superbly functional, and by the curious fortunes of war, she was ours. Her name was Pamir, Hamburg-built in 1905, a big 4-masted bark, 316 feet long, 46 in the beam, gross tonnage near enough to 3,000. She carried almost 40,000 square feet of canvas. The trucks of her 4 main and mizzen masts towered 168 feet above the deck. She was the ultimate development of the square-rigged sailing ship. Seized as a prize in war from her Finnish owners, she lay in Wellington Harbour. But what could New Zealand do with a big square rigger? Could we sail her? We could, and did, and nearly 250 New Zealanders were to serve in her before she was ultimately returned to Gustaf Eriksson, her former owner. This program is a composite, the recollections of 5 men who sailed in her. Captain Galloway.
It's just part of my seafaring career.
Which is a very practical approach. You didn't feel it deeper than that.
Well, I'm glad I was there, and it's something that a lot of people haven't got. But as I said before, it's just part of my seafaring career.
Captain Jenkins.
We got people there that you wouldn't expect to like sailing ships. They only came there, I think, just to try it out once, and they ended up by staying for years.
Murray Henderson.
Man alive, on the way from Australia to Cape Horn, there were probably many times, if a man was honest, when he wished he was home with Mum, because it wasn't, there was nothing glamorous about that. It was a tremendous experience, but it was hard and demanding, and it was quite unlike anything that I'd ever experienced in my life before.
Frank Gardner.
The life is completely different. So the ship is your world. What happens on the ship becomes giant proportions. Not what happens in the world, it's what's happening around you.
The 5th contributor is now dead, Bob Renner. His recollections are preserved in his writings and recordings. Not all these men served concurrently in the Pamir, and this is not the story of a single voyage, nor for that matter the story of the ship. It's a series of impressions and recollections, at times individual, at times representative of all who served in her.
She looked absolutely beautiful when she came in. I wondered whether I was seeing things. I had never seen a sailing ship of that size in my life. And then I haunted the Union Company and the ship until I got there.
This was 1941 she arrived, is it right?
1941. I think it was about the middle of the year. I know that I first joined her on the 1st of December 1941.
So you signed up as a ship's boy?
Yes, deck boy. In the company of about 11 others, I think there were at the time.
How old were you at the time?
I had turned 16. I was getting on for 17.
In those days, one had to present themselves to the shipping office where a general call was made. So many ABs for the Pamir, and a given number of men would stand virtually in a line. And the master, in that particular case, it was the acting master who later became the chief officer, Mr. Lewandale, one of the Finns who had been in the ship when she was captured. And he just called for the given number of ABs, and he exercised his right of choice by just pointing to the fellow in question. This happened, of course, again with ordinary seamen, and it certainly happened with the deck boys, and I was just one of the lucky 3 that was chosen.
He just looked at you and pointed?
Yes, he did. And I was unknown to him, of course, as were the others. And it was... this is just the way seamen were chosen. And this system has long since gone by the board, of course. The roster business has taken over. But that was the general way in which crews were chosen, and certainly the way in which the Pamir's crew was chosen then.
What was it like going on board the first time, seeing all this tangle of top hamper?
Pretty bewildering. I just wonder where I fitted into it all.
What were your feelings as you slipped out of Wellington Harbour and the ship felt the wind and she started to come alive as a sailing ship?
Oh, it's terrific. The whole movement is something different. There's only the sound of the sea and the wind. There's not much else.
There was something very special about being on the deck of a wind ship. The noises were so different. Just the wind noises and the slatting of gear. It had a very special place in your own thoughts and feelings. It was there all the time, and it became just so much a part of the daily life on board.
Fellas yelling at each other, and you're getting abused for doing the wrong things, and well, this is how you learn. You make a lot of mistakes, but you soon learn, but for your own sake, you have to.
First voyage, we all took it in turns to be what they call peggies. We had to clean the accommodation, scrub the floors, assist the cook if you were told off to, and we all used to take turns at doing that work, and the rest of the work we were more or less taught to be sailors. And you provided a fair amount of brawn. It's amazing how we all changed in that first voyage. From a lot of fairly weak young men, we suddenly became very, very strong and muscular. It was heavy work. Most of the drilling was implemented in the first 2 or 3 weeks at sea when Captain Stanich implemented a program of taking so many sails in each night with the boys only and resetting them the next morning. And you got your drilling from this.
Matter of fact, I only went aloft once before the ship sailed. And my next experience was in Palliser Bay, and we had a nor'west gale, and I was up there for 5 hours, which I was wondering what the devil I was doing up there. I did too, I can tell you.
Scared?
Oh, God, yeah. Sails blowing out and blowing about 60 knots. Blew about 5 sails out, and it was cold, and which you can understand anyone coming from Wellington, and there's no turning back. It's you're there. There's no consideration given to the fact that you've never been to sea before. You either got up there or, well, I don't know what the alternative, that makes some way, you be punished in some way out of it, and it's the best way. There's no chance of being seasick. You don't have time to think about it.
There was always a laugh. I remember the Pamir in that voyage that I did as an extremely happy ship. With a laugh a minute, we had some born comedians. We had 1 or 2 sober sides too, but by and large it was a very happy crew with lots of skylarking, lots of laughs, and such simple and quite probably in the context of today infantile practices like cockroach races on the galley bench at night when we're all in there. The only warm part of the ship, of course, was the galley. The galley fire was kept going at all times, under all conditions. And in the night, when on watch at night, we used to gather in the galley and, chew the fat, as the saying goes, and hatch up all kinds of plots and play practical jokes on anybody we could. But the cockroach races were quite hilarious, and I suppose when you think that, there was 34 people aboard, there was something like 25 in the actual forecastle crowd, and living in close proximity like that for a very extended period. We were together for almost 9 or 10 months, and on the rather prolonged journey from Australia to Britain, 127 days at sea without sighting land, or even the first ship for 70 days out, and the tough voyage to the Horn and round it. You had to make your own fun, and some of it, as I say now, you would look back on and think, cripes, we're a bunch of kids, but it all came out very well, really, and there was lots of pranks and lots of skylarking, but that was just one of the other ruses were, hatching plots about how we were going to steal the eggs out of the pantry, which was always kept securely locked, and the great little bits of gear that were rigged up with little braces and hoists and claws to poke this contraption through a porthole and be able to lift the eggs out one by one from their trays so that the cook wouldn't know. But He wasn't born yesterday either, and I think he was well aware of what was going on.
What sort of a ship was she for a second officer, or a first officer as you became?
Well, we made her a very happy ship. We worked very hard, the food was good, and my days in her were most enjoyable.
As a ship to sail?
Well, once we did 299 miles between sites, which means it's not quite 15 knots, and she's most enjoyable.
We had a sailor on board by the name of Donald Urquhart, whom I think did more by example than most people. He was an outstanding seaman. He was boatswain of the ship at one stage. And we had a lot of others that come to mind. Harry Dando was one. Captain Galloway himself, Mr. Galloway at the time, he was a personality in his own right. Captain Collier was a remarkable character.
In what way now?
Oh, he was an outstanding seaman. He was a family man, and he was a very, very, very outspoken man. We all liked Captain Collier very much. He was commonly known as Two-Gun Pete, and he was a great master.
Now, how did Captain Collier get the nickname Two-Gun Pete? Was this his verbal sharpshooting?
I understand it was. He had that name long before I was born. I never heard. It took me a long, long time to find out that his initials are HS. Horace Stanley Collier. Most unlikely names for a man like him. But where he got the name from, I don't know. I would say that it was his quickness in answer more than anything else. On the trip to England, Mrs. Collier accompanied us. Mrs. Collier was a wonderful type of woman. It would have been hard to get anybody better. She was always there, always ready to put a button on or down a pair of socks, but she never intruded. She was absolutely wonderful.
Bob Renner was 40 when he returned to sail by shipping in the Pamir as able seaman. He had had almost 20 years ashore, working as a real estate agent and a valuer. He had also written for radio and had done a considerable amount of repertory work. He knew words and how to use them. Sailor, writer and romantic, his account of life in the Pamir is a love story in a very real sense of the term. His diary is quoted in Jack Churchhouse's forthcoming book, The Pamir Under the New Zealand Ensign. Here's Renner on Pamir's second voyage, becalmed 10 days out from Wellington.
Friday, November 20, 1942. I didn't turn in during the afternoon. Have started Nichols with Todd, and we did an hour and a half of algebra. We're making quite good progress. Toddy's a nice lad, and he seems to have a quiet way of enjoying himself in his own way. After we finished our algebra, he and I went out on the end of the bowsprit and lay in the sun. The ship lay becalmed, heaving and rolling a little in a crosswell from south and east. She looks lovely in all moods and weather, and has a way with the sea, caressing and masterful. Every lift of her forefoot has the dignity of a well-disciplined thoroughbred. There are two worlds here for me. I take my pick. Sometimes I live within the ship and her company, doing the things that are done aboard. Otherwise I escape to that outside peace which has a matchless beauty in dawn, bright moon, twilight, or dark night. The picture from the bowsprit this afternoon would defeat any mortal artist. Some can catch that purple blue of deep water, some the blue above the ocean, and others clouds in all their moods, but none can catch all the beauty of the picture. The calm glassy sea moves ceaselessly, as though through it the world breathes. It too moves with that rhythm with which the seaworthy vessel bends her bow. The tall, faintly golden castles of cloud, ranged round the horizon like strongholds of the gods, throw shadows on the sea. All of them lead from the ship to eternity. Here and there, little roughs of wind play hide-and-seek between the silent swells, and over all the drape of silence, unknown to those who dwell in a different world we left behind.
But there's little enough silence in the 50s, those latitudes where, unimpeded, the great swells sweep between the Horn and the South Shetland Islands that finger up from the Antarctic. The Southern Ocean demands its toll, as Murray Henderson discovered.
The actual rounding was a slight anticlimax in that the night we rounded the Horn, across the longitude of the Horn, about 60-odd miles south of it. It was quite a bright night with a moon, a modest sea running, and just a fresh breeze. But for the days and weeks before that, we'd had just about everything that could have been dished up in the Southern Ocean. It was a winter-time journey across there. We left 28th of May and rounded the Horn on July the 11th. And the winds were tending to be in the southwesterly corner instead of dead westerlies, and they were bitterly cold and squally and very hard, and gale followed gale down there with monotonous regularity, and it was a very wet, very cold and damp, hard trip. We were perpetually wet and damp. There was no means of heating, there was no running water, there was no niceties like that. But it was just tumbling out, taking in sail. When the squalls went and the weather moderated a little, it would be setting it again, and it was a constant battle, just keeping the ship stable and running free on the way to the Horn. She was a swine of a thing to steer. There was often 4 men at the wheel, an hour, 2 hours at a time. This was your stint. Lookouts on the forecastle head for ice. The unlikely event of other ships wasn't the consideration there. It was ice. We only saw one large berg, fortunately, and it was well off, but it was on all the time, and the further south we went, of course, the more frequent did the sleet and snow showers and gale force winds beset us, and it was just a constant job of taking in and setting sail and making the ship, or keeping the ship safe and steering her well, and living a very miserable life then, because the ship was battened right down. Access to even such things as the toilets, which were forward, often became a virtual impossibility because of the conditions on deck. The wheel decks were full of water all the time. She was rolling anything from 10 degrees to the weather side, and then way off to leeward something like, or upwards of 40 sometimes degrees. And when you worked aloft, by simple geometry, you knew that you were traversing an arc of upwards of 100, 200 feet through the air, and she was just rolling her guts out, to put it bluntly, all the way down there, and with very few respites. I think 44 days, and I think about 30 of them would have been sailed in better than gale force winds.
But it's not only in the southern latitudes that sea and wind tear at a ship. Renner, who wrote of idyllic calms, also captured the sea in its wildest, most elemental fury, and the setting is the Pacific, a little south and west of Rarotonga. His description of a hurricane was recorded after he'd left the Pamir. Technically, the recording shows its age, but it's a classic account of a square rigger fighting for life against wind and sea.
Just after 10 o'clock, I called the captain. A heavy rain squall came whipping out of the northeast, hauling the wind round a point on the port quarter, and the breeze freshened. The barometer had fallen very slightly, but except for the eeriness of the night and for that indefinable something which warns the seaman, the weather did not look bad. However, Captain Champion acted immediately, giving orders to strip her down to lower gallants. We took the Crogic, mainsail, topgallant staysails, royals and upper gallants. 13 sails in all, leaving her with good sailing canvas, ready for anything up to a hard blow. The lads streamed away aloft to make the sails fast. They had barely reached the royals when the wind came away in a terrific burst. Pamir took it well, roaring along in a belt of foam spreading from her sides in a hissing mass. At first we thought it was just a hard squall, but as the wind came harder and harder and the glass commenced to fall rapidly, we knew that something pretty tough was ahead. By this, all hands were out. One watch aloft struggling with the canvas, the other standing by waiting for a lull to take in the lower gallants. The lull didn't come. About 11:15, a blast of unbelievable wind simply tore the clewed-up sails out of their gear, shaking the ship like a toy as she tore along. I could just see 3 of the boys on the foreroyal. They were flattened against the yard, unable to move. They were fighting their way out on the upper gallant yard when Captain Champion gave the orders to get the men down from aloft. They could have achieved little in any case. He decided it was better to lose the remnants of sail than to risk the lives of men. Meantime, other sails had commenced to go. Some of them just burst and disappeared, as though wiped out by an invisible hand. Pamir charged madly on before the livid fury, which roared in hot blast out of the inky murk sweeping over the sea. The 3 men at the wheel did their utmost to control her wild sheers to windward. Hard up and then hard down, swinging desperately about to escape the horrible pressure of the inescapable wind. With each tearing squall seeking to overwhelm her, the intensity of this storm grew and grew. The boys could not get down from aloft. She became unmanageable, burying herself forward where a great wave of foam crashed and broke in boiling masses round the night heads. In those moments, Pamir nearly sailed herself under. She was nearly beaten and staggered with the sick stride of a labouring ship. Through the welter of the elements, she spoke in her own way. "I can do no more." Captain Champion acted with precision. "Let fly your mizzen sheets," was his next order. As those fine cotton canvas topsails threshed themselves to ribbons amidst the sparks of madly lashing chains and the thunder of loose gear, Pamir took heart, lifting herself again and fighting back with all the indomitable courage she possesses. She tore away again before a shrieking squall which came clutching at her with hot fingers, ripping the heaviest cloth to shreds in a paroxysm of elemental fury. I read the barometer. It had fallen an inch in 2 hours. At midnight, the centre of the storm must have been close to the ship. Where no increase seemed possible, the tempest grew, until Pamir could run no longer. Although she only had the main topsail, the huge foresail and 1 staysail left, it was impossible to keep her off. So Captain Champion had the foreyards braced up and let her lay to. As she came round, the roar of the wind changed to a high-pitched scream. Pamir lay over, taking the blast abeam. No one heard the main topsail go. Then the huge foresail, the strongest sail in the ship, burst into shreds. She was hove to, fighting for her life, all hands standing by amidships. The 2 squalls which followed about 1:15 when the glass rose and the centre passed came with an appalling fury, seeming to lift the whole ocean and hurl it at the ship. She lay over until the bells clanged. Breathing was impossible while facing the wind. I was standing at the weather rail amidships, and as she went down and yet further down, my feet left the deck. Under bare poles, she buried the lee rail feet deep. Huge breaking combers, streaming long mains of flying spume ahead of them, drove down to burst on the curve of her bilge and surge over her in an endless wind-driven race of spindrift. She lay inert and helpless, just holding on with all her strength. As the first tearing squall passed, a damp roll of mist like cold steam writhed in the wind, whilst far above it, with the remoteness of another realm, a lone star dodged in and out of the flying rack. There was a comfort in that star, a reassurance difficult to define, but very real in those dire circumstances. During the momentary lull, the second mate reported that the main topmast cap backstay had parted. We had 1 staysail left on the mainmast. The captain told me to get it down to relieve the pressure on the mast. With all hands at the downhaul ready to pull for their lives as soon as the halliards were let go, I eased the sheet about 6 inches. The huge sail, nearly 1,200 square feet, just disappeared, swallowed with hardly a sound. Then the second squall leapt out of the night, flattening the sea and driving before it a wall of spume which rattled like hail. As her brave spars heeled over to an incredible angle, those of us who knew about that parted backstay had but one thought: would the mainmast stand? It didn't seem possible, but thanks to Captain Champion's insisting that Pamir be kept thoroughly seaworthy, everything held. Slowly the wind eased. She lifted her spars again, the tattered remnants of her canvas streaming like battle pennants in the gale. What a magnificent ship! I felt her take courage again and begin to handle the huge cross sea with all her consummate skill. Dawn and the stars revealed the shambles aloft, whilst we set up the 5-inch towing wire in place of the parted stay. Tattered rags, twisted gear, and haggard faces with bloodshot eyes greeted the day. Sunday, the 17th of February. Unforgettable.
The next morning, the most curious thing, the ship looked as if it had been in a snowstorm. There was all the shreds of canvas wrapped around every piece of rope and wire that we had on the ship, and we had miles of it. I once heard somebody say we had 66 miles of rope and wire in the rigging, but the next morning all this was covered with little white pieces of canvas where it had been shredded by the wind. We lost a full suit of sails.
And what was so terrifying, the sheer force of the wind, or the feeling that you mightn't come through it?
The sheer force of the wind. I've never seen anything like it before or since.
Murray, you were racing the Passat, the last of the grain races. Who won?
She did, sadly. But, yes, she gave us a good trouncing too. And this was not altogether the way that the pundits had it when we started, because she had a very cosmopolitan crowd of young adventurers. That's all they could be termed on board. They weren't the quite sophisticated union-oriented crowd that the Pamir had, but they were favoured to some degree by luck. They were in the hands of a very capable old shipmaster, Ivor Haggerstrand, who'd been with the Passat for a long time, and he sailed her well, and he got the breaks in. The race was won and lost in the North Atlantic, and the Passat chose a more easterly course. We went out a little further to the west looking for the westerlies, and they didn't blow, and we took 56 days to go from the line to Falmouth. But she in fact beat us by 16 days, and that was a fair sort of bashing.
Frank, what do you think you got out of your time in Pamir?
Well, if you look at my latter life, you'd say I didn't got much at all. But I actually did get a lot out of it. I met a lot of good people. I got a fair idea of my limitations. Maybe a chance to get close to nature too. When you read a book from the old timers referring to the sea and the sea being their mistress and all that type of thing, you start to understand actually what it is. You always think of those good times of bowling along in the trades, and there's not much on, you have plenty of leisure at night, and you sit around talking, and there's a great companionship builds up between you and the other fellas on the ship. Even though you're not all the same personality, you've all got a common bond of being seamen, and you kind of think you're seamen of the old times. Maybe this is why they bond together a bit, and they go meet each other and be friendly with each other for years, even though they're away from the sea. They've been a shipmate, which is hard to put into words, but it is there of a common interest and very much something belonging to yourself. You share it.
The whole thing finally gelled as a total experience to me anyway, and I think I would speak generally on behalf of most of the New Zealand fellas that sailed in her. It was very much deeper, I think, than just a fleeting association with a ship like that. But even a one-tripper like me must always say that it was a very special experience, very special one indeed, and in a very special ship.
That was a very special ship, the famous square rigger Pamir, seen through the eyes of 5 men who sailed in her. They were Captain Galloway, Captain Jenkins, Murray Henderson, Frank Gardner, and the late Bob Renner. A Very Special Ship was recorded and produced by Alwyn Owen, with technical assistance from Neville Riven. A Spectrum documentary.
In port again at Wellington is the barque Pamir, with another long voyage over. If there's something romantic about a sailing ship still, there's nothing romantic about the Pamir's cargo today. It's coal from Canada, the first cargo of coal that's been brought to New Zealand since 1943. This 4,000 tons of coal being hauled out of the deep holds will be used by our railways, thus making more shipping space available for our West Coast colliers for other types of much-needed coal.
John Weaver. John, how did it come about that you went on the Pamir?
I was in a health camp on Motorhea Island prior to the war, and one morning at assembly we were told that we were going to have visitors, and the children who were in dormitory 10 were to return to their dormitory, comb their hair and stand and wait. We were doing this when in came the party of the uncles who ran the camp, and two men who I can dimly remember. One of them seemed to me at that time to be very tall. All I can remember was the very shiny buttons on his reefer jacket. He strode over, walked in the doorway, strode over to me, and he said, "You are sleeping in my bed." To me, he looked about 15 foot tall. As I say, I was only 9 years old. And after inspecting the rest of the barracks, we were told, the ones from dormitory 10, that we would be taken over on a launch, which I remember well with the Olive Rose, and to inspect a boat.
Now tell me, John, before you get on board, I'm intrigued. Who was this character who talked about being in your bed?
Oh, he was Felix von Luckner, who had been a prisoner of war on Motorhea Island during the First World War, and subsequently made 2 escapes, finishing up rowing to the Chathams and then eventually returning to Germany. He was regarded from memory, and he returned again after the Second World War, as one of the gentlemen of the German Navy.
So, in fact, he remembered the very bed that he'd slept in when he was a prisoner of war.
Oh, yes. He spent quite a long time, I think 22 months on there, on Motorhea Island.
Okay, so we've got you youngsters ready for this unknown voyage. What happened then?
We were shepherded down. At the time, only so many children go because there was a bit of tummy bug going around. I can remember that because I had had it for a day. And we were taken down to the launch at the wharf. The one thing I can remember from that trip is lying on the wharf was the biggest conger eel I've ever seen, smelling. We were taken on the launch. We were taken on board this boat, and the name Pamir always stuck in my mind because it was in big brass letters on at least 4 places on the upper works.
What's your memory of the first sight of the boat then when you got in close?
The height of the masts, looking up and up and up. I had been around the wharves in Auckland earlier when I was younger, but I didn't remember. But just the immensity.
Were the sails all furled at that time?
Yes, yes. There were men working aloft, though. I can remember that quite plainly because I at that stage in my youth, was a bit of a daredevil at climbing, and I wanted to climb. We were allowed to climb the rack lines up for about 10 feet, then all down again, you know. I'd climb quarry faces or trees or anything like that.
Now, the idea was to give the youngsters at the health camp an experience of a sailing boat.
Just to have a look round, yeah.
Was it a look round, or did they go for a sail?
No. She was tied up at the wharf. I don't know what she was doing. I think loading wool, from memory.
And do you remember talking to any of the crew or finding out more about the boat?
No. I saw her again in Wellington twice in later years after the war.
Now, it's amazing because that was a very brief visit by a 9-year-old boy back in the 1930s.
Mm.
You remembered the name, the brass nameplate, you said, but there must have been a very strong memory left with you that you should remember so much later, your connection, very brief, with the Pamir.
Well, yes, because I have read all my life, read voraciously anything about the sea. I was never served at sea or anything, but I read right from Slocum's stories to I even read Hornblower. That's how I've followed life at sea.
Do you think, though, that brief visit to the Pamir, now so many years later, was a pretty special time for this young 9-year-old? Very much so. Why do you think it was special?
Because even then I learnt an appreciation that things were passing. Gustav Eriksson, who bought the Pamir and a whole lot of other boats at the same time, he was a man of great vision. He could see, and I saw as I grew older, that all these things would pass. That's why I've been involved and interested in steam trains, anything old. And now that I've got pretty old myself, I see just how right my thinking was.
So the Pamir might have started you on this journey of respecting the traditional way, the past way of doing.
Yes, and enjoying nostalgia.
John, while I've got you here, I just thought we might take a little bit on about the health camps, because it obviously that was where you were. On reflection, as a youngster, you went there. Could you just tell me briefly why you went there?
Well, we were living in a town in the King Country called Mangapahi. It's no longer exists. It was a sawmill town. We had a lot of deaths there during the diphtheria epidemic, and my mother had a cot death baby, her fourth child, and it was decided that my sister and I would go to health camp, and my mother would have her second daughter, who was 3, for a while, and just give her a break. Conditions in the King Country were bitter. There was no electric power. Nutrition, my parents were wonderful looking back on it. They worked, we had gardens, we were never short of food, but things were very, very hard. They talk about the year of the women's suffrage, but they want to investigate what some of the mothers and wives went through in some of those damn sawmill towns. They were hard.
Well, with you and your sister out of the way, she probably had at least a few minutes rest each day. What did it mean for you, though, as the youngster going to the health camp?
Travelling, I can still remember travelling all day in a hot second-class carriage, arriving in Auckland just on dark. I don't remember how we got to a church. I'm sure it was a church hall, and being fed baked beans and toast. The one thing I do remember was a very tall man holding up a saucer above our heads. We were all lined up, and he held the saucer above our heads, and he had a lighter. And another man yelled to him, "Right, light it." And I didn't realise till afterwards he was lighting a magnesium to take our photograph. That's things like that stuck in your mind. The morning rally to clean your teeth with salt water in a mug, because no one could afford toothpaste those days. The rumours that went around amongst all the kids in the health camp that the milk tasted peculiar. It was actually goat's milk, we were told. It came over in big cans from the mainland. The stories that the uncles told at night round campfires, the stories of Gerald and George, the intrepid spies. Now, don't forget, this was in the period immediately before when Hitler was coming into power, and spying was big business.
Do you think the youngsters looked on those experiences at the health camps with fond memories, or was it a fairly tough regime?
No, it was very, very fond memories. The people who administered those places, the uncles and aunts, uncles the boys' dormitory and aunts the girls' dormitory, usually were older people, and they were treated with great respect. They were dedicated people, not necessarily church people or anything like that. They were people who felt that, righto, they had a job, but they put their heart and souls into it. Nothing was too much effort for them.
And you still buy health stamps?
Oh, yes. As a matter of fact, I still have in my collection 3 red boys and 3 blue boys, and no, they are not for sale.
Yes, Alison got the checkbook out there for a moment. Thanks, John. Happy, Alison? Were you just thinking of the timing more than anything? Yeah. Thanks, John. That's great. Okay. Good. Tom Edmondson, how did it come about that you were on the Pamir at all?
Well, I was very fortunate to be in the right place at the right time. I was the carpenter on board, and all blue water vessels, that is, vessels going away from the shore, carry a ship's carpenter, shipwright. I knew there was a vacancy coming up on the Pamir. I applied for it, and fortunately, I was selected for the job.
Why were you keen to be on board the Pamir?
Well, I was early 20s, I was young, and it was something I would never ever have another opportunity to go on a square rig sailing ship. They're beautiful ships to sail on.
So it was the beauty and challenge of the sailing ship?
Definitely.
Were you disappointed or not when you finally did get on board then?
The only disappointment I ever had on it was when I paid off, finally. I could have stayed on it, but I wanted to do one more trip, but I had promised to come ashore and get married. I'd been going with my future wife for 6-7 years. As my mother said, I think you've forgotten what you're going with her for. So I kept that promise and came ashore. Otherwise, if it hadn't been for that, I would have stayed at sea. Yes, it was a fantastic job.
What's your most outstanding memory of your years on the ship?
my own personal satisfaction outside of work, I fail to see how anybody could sail on a vessel like that through the tropics and remain an atheist. Picture, if you can, up in the trade winds, just breezing along nicely in a lovely trade breeze, 32 sails up, just on an acre of canvas, lying on the deck in the evening, the stars, and if you've been up the tropics, you've never seen stars so big as what they have up there, and looking up the gentle curve and belly of the sails, looking up and thinking, who created all this? It is the closest thing to perfection and to heaven that I've ever been, and I fail to see how anybody can lie there with no throb of the motors, no vibrations, just the gentle movement of a sea, and looking up and seeing these stars, the sails. Who said there's not a creator?
Heaven is a sailing ship.
That's right, in the tropics.
As a carpenter, was your work much different compared to a conventional ship?
Well, yes, in that the fact that one of my main jobs was the upkeep of blocks. So you had all the rigging. Now, just the standing rigging alone, there was over 3 miles of standing rigging.
And what's a block, Tom?
Well, a block, do you know what a block and tackle is? Where the rope goes through a sheave for lifting sometimes you get 1, 2, 3, 4-fold blocks for lifting heavy weights. Well, there were somewhere between 450 and 500 wooden blocks on that ship, and they all had to be kept in good repair.
Those are those sort of oval-shaped wooden
oval shapes with a sheave in the middle,
and
sometimes they'd have 4 strands of rope, or 3 or 2, but they had to be kept in good repair because all the running rigging went through blocks ranging from small ones, say 6 inches long, up to larger ones up to 14, 15 inches long.
Did you use particular hard wood for that?
Well, it was mainly oak I used for those, but that was just one of the jobs. And
did they wear out with ropes?
Oh
running?
yes,
Yeah.
they get a lot of wear and tear, and then there was other work, general work, sometimes repairs on the lifeboats to keep them up to trim, repairs to the decking, other woodwork goes off, has to be renewed.
What about the masts and the spars?
Oh no, they are all steel.
Were they?
All the masts were steel, and all the yards were steel, except 2. Right aft on the spanker, they had 3 spars. The bottom one, the big one, was steel, the middle one and the top one were wood. And the strange part about these top 2 are that when I was an apprentice, when the ship first came in, these 2 wooden spars had to be replaced. So the patent slip, the Union Company patent slip, which is now Greta Point, they got the job of making them. And I can still recall them bringing in a 52-foot log of 12 inches by 12 inches of Oregon, 52 feet long. They put it on the blocks, and we all got cracking with adzes and chopped it down to 8 sides. Then all the journeymen went away and left 2 apprentices, another boy and myself, and the boss said, finish it. And we went from an 8-sider down to 16 to rounded it, and even sweated all the bands on. And when we did that, and the boss said, well, that's a very, very good job you boys have done. You can make the next one, the small one. And that was a 48-foot log. And I'll never, ever forgot making those 2 wooden spars on a ship that I eventually ended up sailing on.
What do you recall of the masters or master you served under?
No names, no pact at all. One master, I'd go around Cape Horn in a bathtub.
Let's talk about him first. Why did he give you that confidence then?
He was a sailor to his fingertips. Captain Roy Champion it was. He ended up as harbour master in Littleton, and he was a fantastic sailor. And his chief officer was later become Captain Bill Galloway, who was harbour master here.
What makes a man so respected as a sailor?
For us knowing that he knows his job. He's not telling you to do anything that he couldn't or wouldn't do himself. He knew his work and we respected him, and he made the decisions and they were right ones. Sometimes we didn't always, being that he was the boss, sometimes you clashed, but he was the master, a fantastic sailorman.
And as a sailor, are you able to have a feeling that this ship is in good trim and all is going well as a result of what the master is doing?
Oh yes, a ship speaks. Yeah, particularly in a sailing ship. You can tell if it's got too much canvas on, it's struggling. You can feel it. If you've done any yachting, you'll know what I mean. When the yacht has got too much sail on, it'll tell you it's struggling. Take some sail off and she goes beautifully. And this is the art of being the master of a sailing vessel, is to know just how much sail, because you must remember that the bark carried 5/6 of an acre. And to give you an idea, if you're from Wellington, if you get up on the stand at Athletic Park and look at all the green, not just the paddock, the whole green pasture, that's the size of the sail area. And the big ones, the courses on the bottom, they were half as big again as a tennis court. That's a lot of canvas.
What about the masters that may not have been quite so good?
They weren't sure of their job. When they gave an order, they didn't give it with the same firmness and authority that Captain Roy Champion did. And you just didn't instill that confidence.
And how much would that affect the actual sailing and movement of the ship?
It was still, I don't think it was worked to its full capacity. And when an order was given, you went and did it, certainly, but not with the same alacrity as you would elsewhere when you know the man who gave you the order knew what he was talking about. And away you go. And you had to be quick. When the order went up to take sail in or take it down, there was no messing about. You had to go up and back. Although myself, as a carpenter, I was what they call an idler. I was a day worker from 8 o'clock till 5. But when we made a landfall, coming back from, say, America or Canada, we'd make a landfall at East Cape. And when we're getting close to that, then they would put me in a watch, 4 on, 4 off, purely for extra hand for sail drill. But while we were away at sea, I worked from 8 o'clock till 5. I started at 8, went right through 4 o'clock. At the change of the watch, the first dog, I dished the water out. Of course, fresh water was all rationed under lock and key, and all the crew got 1 pint per person per day. And when we fill the crew's water tank up, say at 4 o'clock in the afternoon in the tropics, by next morning it's empty. They've drunk it during the night. Therefore, until you got your cup of tea from the galley at smoko or mealtime, you couldn't get a drink. It was all locked up.
What are your memories of other characters among the crew?
Other characters, they had some. Another account, my first sailmaker in my cabin aft on port side under the poop, I had my bunk with the sailmaker. Pooled rank, I got the top bunk which had the porthole. But the first sailmaker, he was a Dane. He was one of the original crew, and of course right through the war he hadn't corresponded with his people in Denmark. And when the war finished, he said, "Good, I can write home to my parents." But he hadn't spoken or written his own Danish language for so long, and he said, "If I out in my grammar, I'll get the message." And evidently Danish is like some of these other European languages. To us, the grammar's back to front. And he had to get out an English-Danish and Danish-English dictionary to write a letter home to his own parents. But that's one little thing I remember.
Were they a hard breed of men, the sailing men?
Oh yes, particularly the ones that the original crew that sailed under the Finns. They sailed with about half the number of crew that we did. and they were hard. There's still a couple around Wellington, and there's one man in Wellington who's still here. He's a Finn. He'd be the most powerful man I've ever met. I saw him pick two people up, and they'd be weighed 10 stone each, and they were having a bit of a Donnybrook, and he just picked both of them up by the scruff of the neck, at arm's length, bringed them up, banged their heads together, and gob it. A Finn. He knew that ship inside out. There was nobody that knew more about that ship than him. A hard man, but a marvellous sailor. And he still lives in Wellington, that man. But whereas the New Zealand crews, with a few exceptions, we all had to learn. They were good sailors, but they had to learn the sailing part of it. And they soon picked it up because such was their profession. A sailor had to know it.
Did the New Zealanders develop the same affection for the ship that
yes.
perhaps the original Finns and so on had done?
Oh yes, very much so. I would say that anybody that sailed in it, well, I won't say anybody, but 95% of the people that sailed in it could have stayed on it if they could.
Yet it was hard work for most of them.
Oh yes.
So what is it about that experience that stays with a man?
It's hard work, admittedly, but it's, and I suppose to some degree it's repetitive. It's changing sail, pulling ropes, but it's the open life, I think. No fumes, no engines, no vibrations, just going along. And it's the pure joy of, it's pure sailing. It's like going on a yacht or going on a launch. And sometimes no wind, no go. I've literally seen it when the cook threw some gash over the side after tea at night, and we got up next morning, it's still there. Hadn't moved. No wind. But as we used to say, more days, more dollars. Why worry?
Were there difficulties having a reasonably large crew on a small boat in terms of the relationships between the members of the crew?
No. There were the odd differences of opinion. Certainly you'll get that anywhere where there's a group in a confined space for a prolonged period. There has to be.
And these hard men, there'd be fights and
you get
squabbles?
the odd, yes. But if there was any animosity on deck between two people, that stayed on deck when they went aloft. Because you and I, or those two people, could be working alongside one another, be 150 or more feet up in the air, where animosity or ill feeling could not exist, because my life could depend on you and Vicky Verker. So you couldn't take that up top. Everything was finished.
During your time, were there any fatalities or accidents involving crew on the ship?
No fatalities. We had one close shave. A man who just retired from Harbour Master in Napier, George Gunn. We came out of Vancouver, it would blow the fillings out of your teeth. Shocking. And they dropped us right in the middle of this big storm off Cape Flattery. And if any sailor's been up round Cape Flattery, the entrance to Vancouver, they'll know what storms are. We kept that storm for about 10 days, right down to topsails. And we were about opposite Frisco, level with Frisco. And he had dropped us the wind, say 24 hours. There's still a big sea running, but no wind. And one evening I happened to be on the after deck. I was talking to the captain right outside his bathroom, and the boys were on the Crogic, which is the main yard on the third mast back on the mizzen. And the full watch was up there taking the Crogic in, and we heard a smack. I literally heard the smack, and we heard them all calling out. We couldn't fathom out for a matter what it was. Then we got man overboard. Well, you can't put your foot on a brake like a car. You can't put her astern like they can on a steamer. So we just have you put a flatter back. And she put up into the wind, and she gradually says, "I'll take about a mile or so for it to stop."
Interrupt you, I made a noise. Would you go back to you can't do reverse?
Oh, well, you can't you can't stop like with your foot on a brake, as in a car. You can't go into reverse and stop it like you can in a mechanically driven vessel. This way, all we can do is put the sails, what we call flatter back, in other words, turn the mast round and put the wind on the front side of the sail, which acts as a halt to stop. Well, it takes about a mile, I suppose, before it'll stop. When we heard the smack, heard it hit the water, I went straight up to get the lifeboat loose, get her ready, and then a little voice from down under the stern said, "I'm down here." And what had happened, George had come down. Unfortunately, he was the first one up the mast, therefore he's the furthest out on the yard when he dropped, and he pulled a sail and it had been stuck in it. All of a sudden it gave and he went back, boom. And I suppose he missed the ship by about 2 feet, straight into the water. He managed to kick his sea boots off, and as he came up, the ship was just sort of drifting by. There was no wind. And as I understand it, underneath the counter by the rudder there were 2 big metal rings welded onto the counter, which they could hook a block and tackle on for lifting the rudder out in dry dock. And as the ship went by, George did a couple of things, and he grabbed hold of this ring. Fortunately, there was no propeller, otherwise it would have been mincemeat. And they're dragging him along. So we all down aft, the chief officer, Mr. Galloway, he put a rope round his side. He went over the side, grabbed hold of George, we pulled him on board. Right gun, dry gear, and up top. So he sent him into his forecastle, got changed, dry gear, straight up top again. But that is the only action. And he came down 70 feet.
Tom, just one final question, because of the time thing.
Yes.
You left the ship only, you say, because it was sort of, the word was on you to make sure that you married this sweetheart of 6 years standing.
That's right.
So I suppose, given a choice, as you said before, you could have stayed on the Pamir forever.
Yes.
Have you got one way of just summing up, just apart from the piece about, heaven, what is it about the Pamir itself as a ship that you think still remains special to you?
To me, it is the purest type of sailing, and I love boats, and that is to me what I liked about it was just pure sailing, sails, the wind, sailing with nature, working in with nature. You'll never beat nature, you'll never beat it, but you can work in with it. And if you wanted to go, you could only go where nature allowed you to go. That was the beauty of it.
You came off the ship and got married.
Mm-hmm.
Was it worth leaving the Pamir for that reason?
Yes, I am. And that's. I got married in 1948. I built my own home, and I have never regretted it. Not truly. When the chips are down, there's always things, some people, what we like to have done and we didn't do. There's always those. But I've never, ever regretted it, no. And I'm one of those rare people that I'm still living with the same lady that I married all those years ago. I'm quite happy to be doing so.
But perhaps with some feelings now and again, how nice it would be to spend a couple of days on a boat like that again.
Oh, dear. The spirit of adventure. I'd love to go for a trip on one of those. Love to. Oh, no, I'll never lose the love for that. Never. But you can't have everything you want, can you?
Oh, that's good. Thanks, Tom. How did you come to be on board the Pamir at all, Ozzy? How did that happen?
Well, I was young and the war was on, and I tried to join the Air Force, and I was colourblind, so then I joined the Army, and because we were winning the war, they demobbed everybody, all the young people, and I was only 18 at the time. So I did the next best thing. I went down and joined the Seamen's Union and stood up, and my father helped, as a matter of fact. He was in the union company. He was, and he he paved the way for me, so that I was lucky to get selected with a bit of...
But were you, at the age of 18, particularly keen to get on board and be a crew member of that particular ship?
At that stage I was. And
why was that?
Oh, well, everything was happening overseas, and when you're young you want adventure, and well, the Pamir was the Pamir too. It was something special, you know. It's sailing, four-masted bark sailing out of Wellington. It was just an adventure, that's all.
So even as a young man starting your seagoing career, at the very beginning of it, you still had this feeling, did you, about being on the Pamir?
Well, when it was seized from the Finns and it was brought into Wellington, and my father had always worked for the Union Company, and I just thought that a young chap then, you don't know what you're going to do with your life, and the sea seemed a good idea for a while. And
what got you thinking about it? You obviously saw the ship in Wellington Harbour. Did it start there when you thought, this is the kind of ship I would like to be on?
Yes, well, like a lot of people, I went down to the wharf and had a look at it, and I liked heights, actually. I like climbing in those days, and it seemed like a good idea, that's all. There was no the romance of sail and that I'm afraid that came later, you know. I got to appreciate what it was like being on the sailing ship while I was on it.
What are your strongest memories of that first trip once you did get on board then, back in 1943?
Well, we left in midwinter in July, I think it was, 1943. And when we left, we sailed right across the roaring 40s, almost to Easter Island. And it was a pretty rough start because it was in the heavy wind, and of course I was seasick. But you still had to work, even though you're seasick.
What was your job?
We were deck boys, we were called. But that meant ordinary seamen, working the sails and doing all the seamen's jobs there were. Later on we took the helm and did things like that. Everything on board. I was in the port watch. There were 2 watches. We had 4 hours on, 4 hours off, and it was pretty hard life.
And what were the deck boys expected to do? What physically did you do during your watch?
Well, a lot of cleaning of decks and painting and stuff like that. But we had to work the yards, pull the buntlines and turn the yards and bring in the sails and go up the mast to. You know how they do it, don't you? You go up. There was the right up to the royals, and there's a rope under the yards. You used to stand on the rope and go out along the yard with your belly over the yard, and pull the sail up when you're bringing it in, and haul the sail up on top of the yard and strap it down. And
well, tell me about the first times you had to do that. You told me you liked heights; it didn't worry you. But what are your recollections of the first time up the top doing this job?
Well, it was pretty scary because the first time I climbed up was tied up at the wharf, and I only got halfway up, and that was enough for me. I came down again. It was as bad as that. But when you get used to it, you get very careless. You instead of holding on with 2 hands, you don't hold on at all. You're just working with both hands, and you're out in a raging storm, and the masts are swinging about in the storm, and and you're running some appalling risks, which only young people do. I wouldn't do it now because it's too risky. I remember one storm I was pulling the sail in, and with both hands, and a wind got into it and blew it out, and it threw me right back on my heels, and with just the deck down below, 200 feet below, and someone, one of the other blokes grabbed my arm, but that was as close, as you can get.
And when you're on the top during rough weather and the mast's going all over the place,
there's swinging and yes, very 30 miles an hour through the air, I suppose. And at night time, it was pretty extreme. See, when we came back to Wellington, we struck a very bad storm just off the Cook Strait, and it blew us right past Wellington Heads out into the Tasman. And we lost, from memory, it was 13 sails were blown out, just ripped to pieces. And because we lost so many sails, we were in danger of not being able to manoeuvre the ship, and so we had to get them down and put up new sails. And we worked for 24 hours that time, more than that, I think, just to get the ship seaworthy again so it could be sailed.
And all that's keeping you safe, as it were, is the grip that you've got, what, with your feet and your body around the
feet
spar?
And your body, and hanging on too when you the climbing up to the royals. You're going up the little rope ladder, and sometimes the windsock up on right at the top of the foremast would get stuck, and you'd have to shin up that last bit to get it released. Because you used to sail by that windsock, sailing by the wind. You'd be on the helm, and you had to keep the ship just so that the wind caught the sails, and that's so the windsock was pretty important. And I can remember going up there to release that at night time. And
Ozzy, you were 18. It would have been a very impressionable time. Who are the characters that still stick in your memory from those years?
Oh, the bosun, Andy Keyworth, the captain, champion, lots of them.
What sort of
my friend aboard was Bernie Dietrich, who became quite a famous correspondent over in the Caribbean. He was covered Haiti and Cuba and all those sort of things. He's been back a few times. He's from he's one of Wellington's expat.
It's okay.
Yeah, just you know what I mean.
Yep. What sort of man do you think you had to be a successful master or bosun or sailor, basically, I suppose, on a ship like the Pamir?
Well, the majority of people on it were seamen. They'd been on other ships, and they were the sea was their life, and then there was an element like youth like myself, and who perhaps only stayed for a few years, and that was it. It was very tough work. You had to be strong, and you had to like travel.
Was it particularly tough for the youngsters, the deckhands? Were you worked particularly hard?
Yes. Well, the bosun's mate, they'd show you what to do, and there were lots and lots of ropes on the deck which attached to particular parts of the sails, and you had to learn which is which. And I can remember pulling on the wrong one and getting a biff from the bosun, for instance, which was my fault. I shouldn't be pulling on the wrong one. It could be dangerous. But yes, it was a tough life. But there was a lot of good. Becalmed in the tropics was pretty boring, because we sailed from here to San Francisco. It took us 81 days. We sailed right across nearly to Easter Island, then went up through the trade winds, and then struck the doldrums, and but it was nice in the trade winds with the ship just gently coasting along, and you could hang a rope off the side and go down and into the water, and but you kept your hand on the rope because there were sharks around. There always seemed to be sharks following the ship.
Did you feel particularly regretful that you couldn't have done more than one trip?
Oh, yes. Well, it was only because of illness. I had to leave the ship the day before it left for my second voyage, and if that hadn't happened, I don't know what would have happened. perhaps I'd still be a seaman, I don't know.
But that one trip was enough to make you feel that you would have been happy to have continued indefinitely on board that ship?
Yes, I would have stayed for several trips probably. But in the end, we sailed her back to England and turned it back over to the Scandinavians. And
how would you define that special feeling that apparently exists among all those who have served on the Pamir? Why do you think they feel so strongly about the time they spent on the ship?
Because they feel unique, I suppose, because sailing ships have long gone, and there wouldn't be too many people now who have sailed before the mast, as they say. And also it was different in the way the no noise, the sound of the sails, was a different sort of seamanship in those days. I mean, the yachtsmen would round the world yachtsmen have much the same thing now. That's the nearest thing to it. Except a big four-master like this, it's a bit different, I suppose. We do 16 and more than 16 knots, and at night time with the white foam scudding past, and it felt more like 60. It was, a real feeling of speed through the water, with the lee rail almost dipping under the swells, and that was a real thrill. That to be on the wheel when you're doing that, you remember that. That's one thing you remember.
An unforgettable part of any man's life.
Yeah. Oh yes. That's yeah. Mind you, it was a long time ago, 50 years ago. So.
Well, you've weathered well, Ozzy. I wouldn't have put you at that age. We might wrap it there, mainly because we've got some nice pieces and it'll come in very well. Okay, thank you. Ozzy, when I was talking about characters, what I really should have said was, were there any funny incidents that still stick with you?
Well, I remember the cook. You could hardly blame him. It was about 100 degrees in the tropics, and in his galley it must have been about 200 degrees. And some ABs who criticised his food he didn't like, he grabbed a knife and chased him around the deck. I don't think he would have cut him or not, but that was one. There were lots of... There was the carpenter... I think it was the carpenter in the emergency call out when all hands on deck in a storm, and he got out very fast and up in the royals or the topgallants. I forget where his trousers blew off up on the mast in the wind, but he had to keep on working. There were some fights, but they were being cooped up for 81 days. There are some tensions come but nothing serious happened.
Okay, Boomer.